My son's wife poisoned my tea, but I switched cups when she wasn't looking. The jasmine tea steamed between us as my daughter-in-law Sarah smiled that practiced smile of hers, the one that never quite reached her eyes, while she pushed the delicate china cup toward me across my own kitchen table. "Drink up, Mom," she said, her voice honeyed with false concern. "It'll help with those dizzy spells you've been having." The dizzy spells she'd been causing for 3 months with whatever she'd been slipping into my food. But today was different. Today, while she was distracted by a text from my son Michael, I'd switched our cups. 20 minutes later, she was the one being wheeled out on a stretcher, and I was the one calling 911 with tears in my eyes, playing the confused, frightened old woman to perfection. If you're watching this, subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from. Let me back up and tell you how a 71-year-old retired librarian ended up in a life-or-death chess match with her own family. 6 months ago, I was living what I thought was a blessed life in my 4-bedroom colonial in Westchester County, the house my husband Frank and I had paid off 15 years before he died. I had $2.3 million in savings and investments, a pension that covered my expenses, and what I believed were loving relationships with my 2 sons, Michael and David. Here's the thing about getting older. People start treating you like you're made of glass, like your brain turns to mush the moment you collect Social Security. They speak louder, explain things twice, and exchange those looks when they think you're not watching. But I was watching. I'd been watching for months as things started disappearing from my house. First, it was small things. Frank's cufflinks, my mother's pearl necklace. Then important documents started going missing from my filing cabinet. The deed to the house, my investment statements, the original copy of my will. It was a Tuesday morning in March when I first noticed something was wrong with my tea. I'd been having breakfast with Sarah, something we'd started doing once a week after she quit her job at the marketing firm. To spend more time with family, she'd said. I thought it was sweet. God, I was naive. The tea tasted different, metallic, with an aftertaste that lingered. Within an hour, I was dizzy, disoriented, stumbling into walls. Sarah was right there to catch me, to guide me to the couch, to call Michael with her voice full of worry. "She's getting worse," I heard her whisper into the phone. "We need to move faster." That's when I started paying attention. Real attention. The kind I used to reserve for cataloging rare books and catching teenagers trying to sneak inappropriate materials past the checkout desk. I started pouring my tea into the potted fern when Sarah wasn't looking. That poor plant died within 2 weeks. I installed a tiny camera I'd ordered online, hidden in a decorative owl on the kitchen shelf. I started recording conversations on my phone. What I discovered made my blood run cold. It wasn't just Sarah. It was Michael too. And David. And David's wife Jennifer. They were all in on it. 37 years of raising Michael, teaching him to ride a bike, staying up all night when he had fever, paying for his college, his wedding, helping with the down payment on his house, and this is what it came to. They had a plan, meticulously orchestrated. Sarah would slowly poison me, making me appear to have dementia. They'd already been telling people in town that I was showing signs, forgetting things, confused, paranoid. Michael had been to see lawyers about power of attorney. David had been in contact with a real estate developer about my house. Apparently, the land alone was worth $1.8 million now. The worst part? They'd involved my grandchildren. My sweet Emma, only 16, was being told that Grandma was sick and dangerous. They'd convinced her that I'd threatened Sarah, that I was losing my mind. My grandson Tyler, just 12, had been instructed not to visit me alone anymore. Grandma might hurt you without meaning to, they'd told him. Using my own grandchildren as weapons, that's when I knew the gloves had to come off. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They thought I was just a helpless old woman. They forgot that I'd spent 40 years as a research librarian, that I knew how to find information, how to document everything, how to build an airtight case. They forgot that I'd grown up poor in Brooklyn, that I'd fought for everything I had. They forgot that before I was their mother, their mother-in-law, their grandmother, I was Margaret Chen, and I'd survived a hell of a lot worse than their amateur hour murder plot. I started my counteroffensive slowly. First, I moved my money. Not all at once, that would have raised alarms. But bit by bit, I transferred funds to accounts they didn't know about. I liquidated some investments and bought gold coins, which I stored in a safety deposit box at a bank 3 towns over, under my maiden name. I made copies of every document I could find, including the ones they thought they'd stolen. I'd actually given them decoys while keeping the originals in a hidden safe behind a false panel in the basement, a safe Frank had installed 30 years ago that even I had forgotten about until I needed it. Then I started building my alliance. Funny thing about being an old woman, we're invisible to most people, but we see each other. My neighbor Rose, 78 years old and sharp as a tack, had noticed Sarah's visits coinciding with my bad days. The mailman, Jorge, mentioned that Michael had been intercepting my mail. The pharmacist, Dr. Kumar, found it odd that Sarah had been asking about medications that increase confusion in the elderly. Piece by piece, I built a network of people who were watching, documenting, ready to testify if needed. 3 weeks into my investigation, I made a shocking discovery. Sarah wasn't who she said she was. Her real name wasn't Sarah Mitchell, it was Sarah Brennan, and she had a history. 2 previous elderly relatives had died under suspicious circumstances, leaving her significant inheritances. She was a professional, a black widow who specialized in elder abuse. And my son, my Michael, had known. He'd known, and he'd brought her into our family anyway, like bringing a viper into a nest of rabbits. I confronted him. Not directly. That would have been stupid. But I tested him. I told him I was thinking about changing my will, leaving more to charity. His reaction told me everything. The panic in his eyes, quickly covered. The immediate phone call to Sarah. The family meeting that was called that very night, which I knew about only because I'd planted a listening device in Michael's car. Thank you, Amazon, for making spy equipment so accessible to senior citizens. She knows, Sarah said on the recording. We need to accelerate the timeline. How much acceleration are we talking about? David asked. This weekend, we'll increase the dose, make it look like a stroke. They were planning to kill me in 4 days. Blood is thicker than water, but apparently not thicker than money. I had 4 days to save my own life and destroy theirs. Challenge accepted. Thursday morning, I called my lawyer. Not the family lawyer. He was probably in on it too. I called Martina Volkov, a pit bull of an attorney I'd found through Rose, who'd used her to destroy her son-in-law in a custody battle. I gave Martina everything: recordings, documents, evidence of the poisoning, Sarah's real identity. She listened for 3 hours, taking notes, her expression growing darker with each revelation. Margaret, she said when I finished, this is attempted murder. We need to go to the police. Not yet, I said. I want them to hang themselves. I want it airtight. Can you help me? She smiled, a predator recognizing another predator. Oh, honey, this is going to be fun. Friday, I played sick. Sicker than ever. I let Sarah see me stumble, let her support me to the couch. I mumbled incoherently about seeing Frank, about wanting to go home even though I was home. I watched her exchange satisfied looks with Michael. I heard her on the phone with someone saying, "Almost there. By Sunday it'll all be over." Saturday was the day of the big family dinner. They'd all be there. Michael, Sarah, David, Jennifer, even the kids. Sarah insisted on making her special tea for me. The one with enough sedatives to knock out a horse, according to the tests I'd had done on previous samples. This was meant to be my last meal. The dosage she was planning would cause respiratory failure within hours. They'd find me dead in my bed Sunday morning, and everyone would say how sad it was, but not surprising, given how confused I'd been lately. But here's what they didn't know. Martina had been busy. She'd gotten a judge to issue a sealed warrant. The police were ready to move. Dr. Kumar had agreed to testify about Sarah's suspicious questions. Jorge had documented the mail theft. Rose had photographs of Sarah entering my house on days when I wasn't home, using a key I'd never given her. And I had video of Sarah putting something in my tea, clear as day, from 3 different angles thanks to my growing collection of hidden cameras. The dinner was perfect. I played my part flawlessly, the confused old woman happy to have her family around her. I even let a bit of drool escape the corner of my mouth. Amateur theater from my college days finally paying off. Sarah was solicitous, cutting my meat, wiping my face, the devoted daughter-in-law caring for her declining mother-in-law. The kids looked uncomfortable, but they'd been well trained. They hugged me goodbye carefully, like I might break or bite. And then came the tea ceremony. Sarah made it into a production, talking about how it was a special blend she'd gotten from a Chinese herbalist, how it would help me sleep, help with the confusion. She poured it carefully, stirring in honey, making sure everyone saw her doing it. The perfect murder, witnessed by the whole family who would testify that Sarah had been nothing but loving. "Let me get you a cushion, Mom," she said, standing up to fetch one from the living room. That's when I switched the cups. It took 12 minutes for the drugs to hit her system. She started slurring her words mid-sentence. Then the confusion hit. Then the respiratory distress. Michael was panicking, calling 911, and I was right there with him, playing the confused old woman who didn't understand what was happening. "She was fine," I kept saying. "She was just fine. What's wrong with Sarah?" The paramedics arrived in 8 minutes. The police arrived in 12. Detective Morrison, who'd been briefed by Martina, took control of the scene. He was very interested in the tea, very interested in testing both cups, very interested in how Sarah had prepared it, who had drunk what. "Mrs. Chen," he said gently, "we need to test your blood too, to make sure you're okay." The blood test would show months of poisoning. The tea would show enough sedatives to kill me. Sarah's blood would show she'd ingested her own poison, and the hidden cameras would show everything, including the switch I'd made, which would prove self-defense. But that's not even the worst part for them. While they were at the hospital with Sarah, while the police were questioning everyone, Martina was executing the legal documents I'd signed. The house was being transferred to a trust that benefited only my grandchildren, accessible only when they turned 25. My money was being distributed to various charities, with ironclad provisions that prevented any challenges. And the best part? I'd kept just enough, $500,000, to buy myself a nice condo in Miami Beach and live out my remaining years in comfort, far away from all of them. Sarah survived, barely. The doctors said another few minutes, and she would have been gone. She was arrested in her hospital bed, charged with attempted murder, elder abuse, fraud, and a host of other crimes that would put her away for 20 years minimum. When they ran her fingerprints, they found the 2 other cases, both suspicious deaths that were being reopened. Michael was arrested 2 days later. The recordings were damning. David and Jennifer took plea deals, testifying against Michael and Sarah in exchange for reduced sentences. They'd still do time, but less. 5 years, maybe 3 with good behavior. Long enough to lose everything they'd worked for. Their house, their savings, their reputations, all gone, used up in legal fees. The hardest part was the grandchildren. Emma and Tyler were devastated, their world turned upside down. But I'd planned for that too. I'd set up therapy funds for both of them, made sure they had good guardians in my cousin Linda and her husband. I wrote them letters, to be opened when they turned 18. Explaining everything, telling them that sometimes the people who are supposed to love us are the ones who hurt us most, but that doesn't mean they're not worthy of love themselves. I moved to Miami Beach 2 months later. The investigation was ongoing, but I was free to go. Free to start over at 71, which sounds insane but felt like liberation. I found a nice 2-bedroom condo with an ocean view, joined a book club, started taking salsa lessons. Turns out, there's a whole community of people who've started over late in life. We call ourselves the Phoenix Club, risen from the ashes of our former lives. Rose visits me sometimes. She says the old house looks empty now, bought by a young family who doesn't know its history. The garden I tended for 30 years is overgrown. The kitchen, where I baked cookies for grandchildren who would later help plan my murder, has been renovated. It's like I never lived there at all, and somehow that's perfect. I got a letter from Michael last week. He's in federal prison now, will be for the next 15 years. The letter was full of apologies, explanations, justifications. He blamed Sarah, said she manipulated him, that the debt from his business failure had made him desperate. He said he never meant for it to go so far. I didn't reply. What would be the point? 37 years of being his mother, And he chose money over my life. There's no coming back from that. David writes too, occasionally. His letters are different, shorter, more honest. He says he thinks about that night every day, about how Sarah looked when the drugs hit her, how it could have been me. He says Jennifer left him, took the kids, moved back to Ohio. He says he understands if I never forgive him. Smart boy. I won't. But here's the thing about revenge. It's not as sweet as they say. It's necessary sometimes, like chemotherapy for cancer, but it leaves you hollow afterward. I saved my own life, protected my assets, ensured my grandchildren's futures, and brought criminals to justice. By any measure, I won. But I lost my sons in the process. I lost the illusion that family means something sacred. I lost the naive belief that love is stronger than greed. At my age, you'd think I'd have learned earlier that people are capable of anything. But I'd been lucky before. Frank had been a good man, faithful and kind until the cancer took him. My parents, immigrants who worked themselves to the bone, had shown me what real sacrifice looked like. I'd lived in a bubble of decency, I suppose, and it took nearly being murdered to pop it. The other women in the Phoenix Club have similar stories. Patricia's daughter had her committed to steal her house. Joan's nephew drained her bank accounts while she was recovering from surgery. We're all survivors of the same war, the one where your own blood becomes your enemy, where the people you die for are the ones trying to kill you. We don't talk about it much, but we understand each other. We've all switched the cups, metaphorically speaking. Sometimes I walk along the beach in the early morning, when the sun is just coming up and the world feels new. I think about Sarah, in prison now, probably running the same con on other inmates, because leopards don't change their spots. I think about Michael, whether he lies awake at night replaying that dinner, wondering how his old mother outsmarted him. I think about the grandchildren, hope they're healing, hope they'll understand one day that I did what I had to do. The funny thing is, I'm happier now than I was before. Not happy exactly, but free. Free from the exhausting performance of being the perfect mother, the doting grandmother, the sweet old lady everyone expected me to be. I'm just Margaret now. I read books without guilt, eat ice cream for dinner if I want, dance salsa with Raphael from the club without worrying what anyone thinks. There's something liberating about losing everything and surviving it. People ask me sometimes, the ones who know my story, if I regret anything. Would I do anything differently? Maybe I should have seen the signs earlier. Maybe I should have confronted them directly, given them a chance to back down. Maybe I should have just disappeared one night, left them everything and saved myself the trauma. But no, they needed to face consequences. Sarah needed to be stopped before she killed someone else. My sons needed to learn that actions have ramifications, and I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't just a helpless old woman waiting to be disposed of like garbage. The trial is next month. I'll have to fly back to New York, face them all in court, testify about that night. Martina says my testimony will be the nail in the coffin, that no jury will acquit after hearing how a mother had to poison her daughter-in-law in self-defense to save her own life. The media is calling it the Tea Party murder, which would be funny if it wasn't my life they were sensationalizing. But you know what? I'll go. I'll sit in that witness stand, 71 years old, gray-haired, soft-spoken, and I'll tell the truth about how my family tried to murder me for money. I'll look my sons in the eye and remind them of every birthday party, every Christmas morning, every time I stood up for them, fought for them, loved them with everything I had. And then I'll tell the jury how they sat at my table, eating food I'd cooked while planning my death. They thought I was just a helpless old woman. They forgot that I'd survived poverty, discrimination, loss, and 40 years of bureaucratic warfare in the library system. They forgot that age brings wisdom along with wrinkles, that a lifetime of watching people tells you who they really are, that underestimating someone because of their age is the kind of mistake that lands you in federal prison. The prosecutor says it's an open and shut case. The evidence is overwhelming. Sarah's previous crimes seal her fate. The recordings bury Michael. The plea deals lock in David and Jennifer's guilt. But I know better than to count chickens. I've learned that life can surprise you right up until the end. that the people you trust can betray you, and that sometimes the only person who can save you is yourself. So I'm preparing for the trial like I once prepared for library board meetings, meticulously, thoroughly, with backup plans for my backup plans. I've got copies of everything in 3 different locations. I've got witnesses lined up. I've got my story straight. Not that I need to keep anything straight when the truth is more damning than any lie could be. People say I'm brave. The Phoenix Club ladies call me their hero. Rose says I should write a book. But I don't feel brave. I feel tired. Tired of being betrayed. Tired of fighting. Tired of having to prove my worth, my intelligence, my right to exist, but I'm also too stubborn to quit. Maybe that's what they really underestimated. Not my intelligence or my resources, but my pure, Brooklyn-born stubbornness. I think about Frank sometimes. Wonder what he'd think of all this. He always said I was tougher than I looked, that beneath the librarian exterior was a street fighter. You can take the girl out of Brooklyn, he'd say, but you can't take Brooklyn out of the girl. He was right. When pushed to the wall, I didn't crumble. I fought back with everything I had. The truth is, I switched more than just cups that night. I switched from victim to survivor, from prey to predator, from the role they'd assigned me to the one I chose for myself. And while I wish it hadn't been necessary, while I grieve for the family I thought I had, I don't regret it. How could I? I'm alive because I refused to drink the tea they served me. Tomorrow marks 6 months since that dinner. 6 months since I watched Sarah drink her own poison. 6 months since my sons were arrested. 6 months of freedom, of healing, of building a new life on the ashes of the old. The Phoenix Club is having a party, Patricia's birthday. We'll drink wine that we pour ourselves, eat Cuban food, dance to music that makes us feel young. We'll celebrate being alive, being free, being ourselves without apology. And when new members join, hollow-eyed and betrayed, we'll tell them what I'm telling you now. You're stronger than you know. Age is not weakness. Experience is power. And sometimes when someone serves you poisoned tea, the only thing to do is switch the cups and let them drink deeply of their own bitter brew. They thought I was just a helpless old woman. They were wrong about the helpless part, wrong about the old part, and definitely wrong about the woman part. I'm a survivor, and I have the switched cups to prove it. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.